In 2003, after just getting acquitted for a gun charge while leaving from court, I got arrested by the federal government for drug trafficking, and while detained, waiting to go to federal court, I was then fingerprinted and taken to the Cook County Jail and Facility for court, where I found out that I was charged with murder. Unbeknownst to me, not knowing whose murder I was being charged with. My only knowledge of said murder and identity of whose murder it was while I was detained in Division 8, an officer came on the deck with a newspaper with myself and Martise Nunnery and Marcus Ware, reading an article stating our charges for the murder of high-ranking kingpin, leader of Latin Kings, Cato, which I never knew or heard of prior. So me and co-defendant Darnell Simmons, aka Squeak, who was not arrested with us until some months later, he was charged and went to trial in 2008, to which I was acquitted, because the only witness I had on me was an officer who lied, committed perjury, stating that I made a verbal statement to him, which I never did, and Darnell Simmons had 3 witnesses against him, which one was Marcus Ware, who had an audio confession against him. So after I came home in 2009, I still had a jailhouse case for destroying state property, to which I ended up getting convicted for 1 year afterwards. I came home and they put me on MSR, mandatory supervised release, and house arrest for 1 year during this period of time. That's when this corrupt police, Pookie, which I think his real name is Dave something. This officer in question was prior to a career as a Chicago police, was from the same neighborhood as myself and others, informally known prior to our arrest as Pookie. Once he entered the police interview room back in 2003, I referred to him as the prior nickname for which I knew him as from back in the day, at which point he took a strong stance and corrected me on his correct formal name. So when I was on house arrest, that's when he put the corrupt police, Xavier Elizondo, whom currently is locked up and doing time in federal custody for falsifying affidavits in my case and others as well. During his time of corruption, he accumulated over 38 controlled narcotic buys from people who were hustling in and around neighborhoods, which was secondary to me and my conviction, nothing to do with me. Since the discovery and arrest of said detective, cases have been overturned and dropped. Ironically, they're going to show you how corrupt our federal system has become, for some but not all, because this type of corruption and the downwards departure of how U.S. prosecution bends the constitutionality to save face attests to under-the-table ill-based appropriation that will not happen for some. In this instance, the federal government is using the cherry-picking method because they refused to drop my case when they knew we was never investigated by the federal government prior, and they picked our cases from Xavier Elizondo's investigation, undeniably falsifying affidavits. That in turn was apex, the true beginning. That led to Sammy Booker's house getting raided December of 2012 by CPD in conjunction with an Illinois Department of Corrections, IDOC, parole agent. Illinois has a secondary avenue outside of probable cause to facilitate and gain entry under different means called routine check. During this check of parolee Booker's residence, agents discovered 2 handguns and 1 AK-47. As a reaction to this search, Sammy Booker was arrested and charged and received a violation of his state-based parole. As this process was accruing, the federal government stepped in and placed Mr. Booker in federal custody. A slew of charges and interrogations followed, An introduction to my name in accordance with federal charges was after the arrest and prior to the federal government arrest of Sammy Booker. During this arrest by the feds, Sammy Booker concocted a 10-page statement outlining details that was far from the truth, aimed at helping his defense by the way of framing implications around me and my character that was never close to a lawful truth. And as far as administratively, his accusations continuously prevailed in an unconstitutional fashion, not challenged thus far. All in accordance, combined this very investigation in 2013 prompted the federal government to file multiple indictments for the RICO Act. A charge, regardless if you're guilty or innocent, is very hard to come out from. So, due to the fact in 2013, they fronted their hand by coming in my place of residence with a key. The second time the feds came in a second house was done so the same type of way as the previous. In October 2013, this time I was arrested. Agents said they found 198 grams of heroin, for which I was never arrested for, but I was detained for approximately 24 hours by ATF and FBI and Chicago PD, and released. By this continuous touch and go by agent, this gist of information gave me a secondary knowledge of Sammy Booker's negotiation encounter with said federal agents, which in September 2014, I went to a shooting range, which I took a target sheet with a hole in it and placed this target sheet on my Instagram page, which began a separate investigation by the federal government. On New Year's Eve 2014, while with Michael Miller, aka Fly Mike, not knowing that he, unbeknownst to me, had an agreement with the federal government wearing a wiretapping device, cooperating in contingency that the federal government take time off his cousin's Pierre indictment, which thereafter this informant changed the criteria of how he was going to work for the feds and begun working for payments rather than helping his cousin. During this unbeknownst altercation with said informant, I incidentally, under normal conversation, not having knowledge that the feds had wiretaps on this informant and in his vehicle, I mentioned that the feds were coming for me confirming a RICO and that Sammy Booker was undeniably putting lies under my name to facilitate it.